Welcome to a bonus episode of Brainworms and Tangents. My name's Carissa,
And I'm Pamela.
and we're two 20-somethings with ADHD on a quest to chase the impulsive ideas we can't shake. This is a self-growth podcast that is all about becoming who you want to be, one brainworm at a time.
Today's bonus episode, we are going to dive into Andy Frisella's birth chart. Are you excited, Carissa?
I'm so excited. I think this is so different than our usual content, but it's so perfect.
Is it different or is it all going to tie back? It might.
It might.
Well, we got this idea from our 75 Hard podcast and we started the challenge and we were giving the introduction to it. And I don't know what made us say it, but we said we should read Andy Frisella's birth chart. He's just like such an interesting person. He's such a character. And I know you did a little bit of research on him and I dove into his birth chart. So I think we're going to really be able to develop a good profile on who this man is.
This is so great. So where are we starting?
Hopefully with this episode, we don't make both the astrology community mad and the 75 Hard community mad. So I'll do my best to do both sides justice. But I think this intersection of these two things that are typically thought of as opposites is really interesting because isn't the woo-woo stuff just kind of the same as like the grind culture, productivity bro stuff? Like, I think there's a lot of places where it does intersect and we should stop acting like it's just so different.
Yeah, I mean, I think both people are passionate about things and are bettering and enhancing their lives in different ways. So I think we have the same end goal. I think maybe in how we get there could just be a little different.
Yeah, totally. It's like all trying to do the same thing. But like, if you think about it, like the woo-woo stuff is like manifestation. But then the productivity bros are like visualize the future. Is that not the same?
It sounds like manifestation to me.
It sounds like manifestation.
They have mantras and rituals.
Yes! Mantras are spells. Like,
yeah.
they're affirmations. And like totally with the rituals, like what's the difference between a ritual, like a spiritual ritual or like a routine, you know? Especially if you have intention behind it.
Yeah.
Astrology and spiritual stuff talks about alignment, making sure you're aligned. But then grind culture is all about optimization. Same thing.
Same thing. Yeah. And I think it's also about like the mind-body connection. Like when you think about like athletes, that's what they're trying to do. And you have to have the right mindset or else your body's not going to perform. And I think you see that in everything, in like wellness and self-growth. And that's like a lot of the same. Wow, you're right. We're all the same.
I know. And we just need to start talking about things in the same terms and relating to each other. Like you just got to talk to people who think of things differently than you to really understand we're all kind of the same. I talked about this in the 75 Hard episode, but I keep coming back to Saturn, where like Saturn is the planet of discipline, of reaping what you sow. And all of 75 Hard has so much Saturn energy of like just being disciplined and not relying on immediate gratification. And it really is a big Saturn ritual. Like the more that I've done 75 Hard, I've felt like I am really following in like Saturn's energy. So I think that has been a really cool intersection of the two.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. Talk about like Saturn return, and it's all about preparing yourself for this big thing. And habits is obviously a good step to do that. That goes hand in hand with discipline and the routines that you have and the systems in your life that exist. If you don't have those, you're not going to be ready for your Saturn return.
Exactly. Saturn return's all about reaping what you sow, so you gotta make sure you're prepared. So I did make an attempt to interpret Andy Frisella's birth chart, but I do have some disclaimers before I dive into it. So first disclaimer is I am not an astrologer. I am just a girl who looks up stuff about astrology on the internet. So everything I could be saying could be wrong, not based in anything. So I am definitely not making any statements about Andy's character. This is all just speculation, all in good fun. Nothing that I say is real for our purposes. I also was not able to generate his full chart due to some lack of information, and I also had to guess on a couple things. So that is also not going to help with the accuracy. So, for example, I don't have his birth time. So, we were not able to generate the houses in astrology. The houses basically tell you what area of the person's life is affected by the placement of the planet. So, we just don't have an idea of what area these things are touching on. So, it might say that he is sociable, but we don't know if that relates to family. We don't know if that relates to business. We don't know if it relates to health, right? It's just not really giving us the context of like where these planets live. So that is one drawback of this. I also didn't know his exact birthplace. So he has said that he's grown up in Springfield, Missouri. That's like around St. Louis, it sounds like. But I don't know if he was like randomly born in Arizona. So we're just going to guess his birth time because that would affect it too. But with the info that I did get, so we know that his birthday is September 29th, 1984, making him 42. And that's really all we need to pull up a very basic chart. So when I'm talking about the birth chart, you've seen before, Carissa, right, that circle. That is what I'm going to interpret.
Yes.
Do you want to explain what the circle looks like in general to the audience?
I will do my best. I do think it's funny that I do have my astrology poster behind me.
Oh, yes.
And so, if I'm correct, the circle shows all of the signs, and it kind of has a lot of different lines showing. The lines are different colors that determine different things that you'll explain. But it's easy to see the areas, I guess, across all of the 12 signs, like where you have your placements. And then from there, you just interpret it based on what the lines mean and the colors and all of that things. It's also fun if you don't know, I guess, the basics of astrology, knowing that there's different elements that all the signs fall under. So by looking at that circle, you can kind of see the groupings and clusters and pairings. So if you can see the thing behind me, somewhat what it looks like.
Yeah, that was mostly correct. So,
okay, great.
So when we look at the chart, you want to kind of picture a wheel with 12 sections, the 12 signs. What is also typically in a chart is the houses. So there's 12 houses as well. So you'll see this wheel that has lines that indicate where the signs fall and where the houses fall. So on this is where the planets are plotted, and they're plotted in degrees of each sign. So that's why they're just scattered around the circle, and kind of paints a picture of what's happening. Carissa mentioned the different colored lines. So what those lines are is when planets make angles to other planets, they will typically, whatever software you're using, they will typically highlight some of those patterns, those aspects is what it's called, those degrees, to show which ones are different degrees. So for example, a 90-degree angle between planets, that's going to be called a square, and that's typically a challenging aspect because the planets are not working together. They're working against each other. Whereas a more harmonious aspect is going to be a trine, for example, which is 120 degrees, and those planets are working together. So it goes down to a lot of different categories of degrees. But if you don't know what a birth chart looks like, I recommend pulling one up just to look at it. And we'll insert on the screen a picture of Andy's and post on our Instagram so you can see. But I know it's really popular for people to immediately pull your sun, moon, rising, your big three, and go from there. But if we're really looking at someone's chart, I like to first start with what is the pattern of all the planets, because that really tells us about how the energy is going to manifest altogether. So how the planets are arranged on this circle really tells us how they're working together. So
would you say it's more about, you said like the arrangement of the planets? Do each of the planets have like their own energy? Or is it more just so the order in which like they are?
So each planet does have its own energy, and that's kind of how we interpret what's happening when it's in each sign. So
Mm-hmm.
Mars in Taurus is going to act very differently than Venus in Taurus, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's what each energy of the planet is bringing. And I think that's what most people are familiar with, is what
Yeah.
energy does each planet bring into the sign that it is, that it's in. But I think there's a lot to gain when we look at the overall pattern as a whole. So if you look at
Mm-hmm.
Andy Frisella's birth chart, when you look at Andy Frisella's birth chart, you'll find that his planets only cover 1/3 of that wheel, of that circle. And when people have their planets arranged like this, it typically means really concentrated energy, just really focused energy. It's nicknamed also the fireball sometimes. So if you can
Fun.
think of that, just like really focused energy where, yes, maybe Mars in Taurus is acting one way, but it's really focused when we see
Mm-hmm.
these planets all concentrated in the same signs. So when we have all these planets only within 1/3 of the chart, or 120 degrees, this is called a bundle. Now, if there were to be planets over half of the chart, so 180 degrees, that is called a bowl. Now, let me tell you about an opposite pattern. So, if you had a splay, for example, that is when planets are just all over the place. They're just splayed throughout the whole thing. And that comes with unfocused energy. So, it's been said a bundle is more like a laser, but a splay is like a floodlight, right?
Okay.
So, this is telling us
I'm
about
learning so
how.
much.
That's great. That's telling us about how our planets are acting when they're in the chart.
Okay.
So, like I mentioned, bundle means concentrated life force, specialization, obsession and mastery, intensity over breadth, all your eggs in one basket energy, um,
Mm.
personal magnetism. So, for example, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr have bundles in their chart.
Okay. I was gonna ask you if there are some like famous, well-known bundles,
Yeah,
but
and if you think about them, it's like
interesting.
very like magnetism, really intense, like music,
Yeah.
like focus. So it really produces intense, hyper focused people because their energy is just concentrated in the same areas of life.
Okay.
Now, with Andy, we don't know what areas of life they pertain to because we don't have his houses, but we
Hmm.
can know the energy that is hyper focused. So we'll
Yep.
talk about that. When you're looking at the bundle, it is also important the first and last planet in the bundle. So, what is beginning and ending what we call sometimes the planetary parade, right? So, these
Mm-hmm.
planets in order.
Okay.
So, the cutting or leading planet in Andy's chart is Mercury in Virgo. So, what our cutting planet tells us is the energy that this person is leading with. So, what I'm about to describe to you is, so this is the overall energy that we're getting, and I'm going to paint a picture of how all these planets work together to give us Andy Frisella. So the energy that he's leading with is Mercury and Virgo, so Mercury, you asked about the energy that they bring. Mercury really has to do with thought and communication. If you think about the Greek god Mercury, when someone has Mercury in Virgo, they tend to be more analytical, over emotional, observant. They want to understand something fully before engaging with it. They're very detail oriented, and they interpret life through problems to solve. Basically, their world is what they can analyze and make sense of. And Mercury is very comfortable in Virgo. Mercury is a ruling planet of Virgo, so it just really intensifies this energy. Now, opposite of our cutting or leading planet is our trailing planet. So the planet that is at the end of the line of planets. So this planet tends to be how they balance the energy of the leading planet. So you can kind of think of it as like the broom at the end of the parade that is just like sweeping it all up together, right? And it's the bundle, right? Like it's all together. So just bundling it all up. So it can often show hidden strengths and untapped potential. It's how they are organizing themselves. So for Andy, it's Saturn and Capricorn. And I think it's really interesting that Saturn is his trailing planet because I've talked so much about Saturn and how it relates to 75 hard. It is a planet of discipline. So his discipline being what ties everything up in a neat bow is really interesting to me as we get into the rest of his chart. So Saturn in Capricorn means that they respect structure, they have some natural authority, they're very goal-oriented and ambitious, have high responsibility, and of course are disciplined. So you did a lot of research on Andy. Is any of this coming together from what you know of him?
I think it's interesting when we think about like his brand. I think like Andy as a whole, he really is known for two things. And I think it's his podcast, The Challenge, and his supplement world that he like oversees. So I think it's interesting when you think about the work that he does, and it's very heavily saturated in that. When you mentioned like his Virgo and Mercury, I think him having a podcast and talking about ideas and like communication being the main form of like how he's getting his ideas out to other people, I think that's very interesting. When we think about like his supplement company and how that directly ties into like his podcast, it seems like everything that he does is very cohesive. Like he's very loyal to his brand, and that is like shown through on through. Like he doesn't have random side projects that we know of. He seems very like consistent as a person.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's totally reflective of his very concentrated energy. It's all here, and this is what he's going to do. So when someone has a bundle, it naturally creates a lot of stelliums. So a stellium is when you have 3 or more planets in one sign, and that also means concentrated energy because there's a lot of planets in one side pulling on that energy. So the first stellium is the Pluto, Mars, Jupiter stellium in Scorpio. So that means Pluto, Mars, and Jupiter are all in the sign of Scorpio. So what's really interesting is Pluto and Mars both being in there. Similar to how Virgo was ruled by Mars, Scorpio has been ruled by Mars in the past. And then when Pluto was discovered, Pluto became the planetary ruler of Scorpio. So they're both rulers of the sign Scorpio. So 2 planets that are also comfortable here. Again, more concentrated energy where they're really able to express that energy. So Pluto and Mars in Scorpio are really tied to intensity, being emotionally extreme, obsessive, and I highlighted this because I thought it was interesting. Emotional endurance was a line that I literally saw. And if that doesn't sound like mental toughness to you, I mean...
Whoa. That is so interesting. Because I think when we think about 75 hard, a lot of people don't like it because it's that all or nothing mentality. It is you mess up, you start over. It is this like full-fledged like people don't like that about his personality. They're like, why can't we just do part of it? But I'm like, that's not the point. That's not Andy. And it's in the stars. How
Yeah.
could he ever do something else?
Yeah, I remember when we were talking about him on our part 1 podcast, you said he's just an intense guy, and so much of this is pointing to being such an intense guy.
Yeah. Wow. That's so funny. Emotional endurance. Look at that.
I know. Now,
We got to get him on the podcast.
I don't think he's gonna.
Reading Andy Frisella's birth chart
to him.
Oh, gosh.
So the third planet that is there, like I said, was Jupiter. So Jupiter is a planet of expansion. So that is really going to just expand on what's already present. But it's expansion, transformation, which I also think is interesting themes, coupled with the emotional endurance. So a lot of intensity in Scorpio. That's what the sign is known for. So taking all three of these into consideration, at one's best, if they have a Scorpio stellium, they are a transformative leader. They have resilience. They are deeply loyal. They are a guide to others through darkness. This is telling the person to always go deeper.
I think just looking at, like, again, back to his brand, and he has that year-long challenge, too, on top of 75 hard that we had talked about. And knowing that it's all about transformation, and that's something he incorporates into his life because of this. He's literally destined to do this. And I think the interesting part, which I'm curious to see if it comes up, is that like leader trait, like how he is like spreading this message to other people and allowing them to like join this journey with him.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
Totally. Now, his other stellium is in Sagittarius. He has 4 planets in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is known as the sign of freedom, truth-seeking, optimism, adventure, no BS. So we have Moon in Sagittarius, which means that emotions need movement. They don't like to feel stagnant in their emotions. That's just emotionally deadening for them. So always like exploring emotionally. Uranus in Sagittarius rejects rigid systems. They create personal philosophies, and they need ideological freedom. Mars in Sagittarius is restlessness, blunt honesty, challenge, and enthusiasm. Neptune in Sagittarius is spirituality, philosophy, travel, interested in metaphysics and cultural exploration. So if we take all of these signs together, this is someone who needs to reinvent their beliefs repeatedly. They crave growth. They seek truth experientially, meaning that's how they like to explore ideas is through experiences. And they idealize freedom. The theme here is to go further. So if stellium and Scorpio was go deeper, this is go further.
Wow. I think this is so fascinating.
You know what I think is funny? You did mention, and we discovered before choosing to do the 75 hard, that Andy Frisella was a very big anti-masker.
Yes.
And I think that's just funny with the idealizing freedom. Like
freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting to see, like, obviously, if this plays into like people's political beliefs and things like that. But yeah. Anti-mask Andy Frisella. At least at one point, and again, not saying I don't know anything about this man, but that is very interesting. Go further, go deeper, Andy Frisella.
Yeah. So if we take both of these stelliums together, this is someone who's searching for the ultimate truth, who doesn't tolerate superficiality, has repeated reinventions of themselves. They want experiences that fundamentally transform them. Basically, truth through transformation.
Wow. Were you just having so many aha moments when you were going through this?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I didn't know if it would really click, but sometimes when you're reading a chart and it just like, you can really see the picture that is being painted of this person. Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
true or not, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, but we have created one pretty intense, interesting character
Yeah.
through this chart that we've created.
And people say astrology's fake.
And they say it's fake. So now if we're going to chat about the big three, we've
Mm-hmm.
talked about, where is the energy concentrated? What is going on in this bundle? Let's talk about the big three because it is important.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we don't have an ascendant or a rising sign because we don't have his birth time. So we're not sure about that. But his sun is in Libra, which is the same sign as you, Carissa.
Yeah. And me and Andy could not be further of different people. But hey, we're both Libras.
Well, it goes to show there's so much more to a chart than a sun sign.
For
There
sure.
is so much in this chart that points to who he is as a person that would not be in your chart, Carissa. So you
Mm-hmm.
really got to interpret it all together.
Yeah.
So, what Sun in Libra typically means is someone who values harmony, balance, fairness, diplomacy. They are peacemakers, they're socially intelligent, and they are mediators.
I think it'd be so interesting. Obviously, we don't know Andy personally, but I think it would be when we talk about like the transformation piece, it'd be curious to see how he's changed as a person, like from elementary school, middle school, high school until the person he is today. Because I could definitely see him like having that like reinvention of self over time. Like one of the random things I saw when I like was looking him up was that he struggled like as a kid with like his weight and like bullying and things like that, and I could see that being more so a like anchor to all the things that he's doing and kind of like building upon that like his child self and how he wants to like redeem that and like whatever that looks like in like his goal setting. But I'd be curious to see how he's changed over time than just the podcaster 75 hard founder that we know him as today.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't even been in the public eye for very long, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
75 Hard came out in 2019, and it's only 2026. Like, I mean, 6 years, 7 years isn't too long in the grand scheme of things. We don't know how many
Yeah.
previous versions of Andy Frisella. We don't know if there's anything else he tried. But like when you get
Mm-hmm.
famous off of one thing, you're gonna stick to it. But
Yeah.
even after releasing 75 Hard, he did the new thing. He did the Live Hard challenge not
Mm-hmm.
long after that. And I don't know when his supplements came like to be. It's all in the
Yeah.
same realm. It shows his energy and focus in the same areas, but like it sounds like he's constantly just like need to go like through a new thing, need to constantly
Mm-hmm.
transform.
Yeah. And he wrote a book. He has like his app.
Yeah, he's got
But and
like
I think
children's
like
books. Like,
yeah. And I think part of that just goes for him being a businessman at heart. I think if you have something, you have a brand, like how can you make money off of that? And from listening to his podcast, he did mention like this was something he did personally before he even like made the podcast and shared it with the world. So 75 Hard was a thing way before 2019, just didn't exist to us.
that's really interesting. And I'll get to that in a minute. But Um, finishing up his big three, he has the
Yeah.
Sagittarius moon, which we chatted about, but, need emotional movement, meaning, possibility, processes emotions through philosophy, humor, exploration. So if we look at that combination there, it's someone who's charismatic, playful, and socially adventurous. So I might not find him charismatic, but I also think that maybe that charisma is a little bit of the glue that holds it all together because
Hmm.
if you are too intense and always, especially a Scorpio, sometimes Scorpio can be very abrasive.
Hmm.
This charisma, this harmony, social intelligence that comes from Libra probably, helps smooth over some of those more intense personality traits.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's even clear what we were talking about earlier. I think his personality as a whole is much more than 75 hard. And I think people are easy to not like be a supporter of Andy, but still really believe in 75 hard. People are still willing to like follow this plan that he created because they believe in it, but they don't actually like align with his personal views. So I think that's very interesting. And like people are still willing to listen to the podcast and follow the things he's doing, maybe because of that like charisma that he has, because they're like, at the end of the day, they believe in 75 hard. And they're like, what he's saying actually makes sense, even though it might be intense and a bit abrasive. And like, as for me, like, that's the only episode I've listened to his podcast. Whereas some people, you know, probably listen to the whole thing and like have much more of a following. Whereas I only know him for this one thing. But I'm still like willing to do it and listen to it because I believe in it, but not necessarily like the person. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, totally. So if we take all of these personality traits, going to give you just a rundown of what we are seeing from just the chart. So when we talk about the planetary energy that is coming from him, he's leading as someone who's analytical, precise, and has attention to detail. The Libra sun and Sagittarius moon give him charisma. I think that's social glue for him. Then he has that intense energy from the stellium, searching for truth, transformation, going deep and far. And then Saturn in Capricorn as that broom. So discipline, reaping what you sow, delayed gratification. And that's kind of the energy that we're dealing with Andy, but we of course don't know what area of life that pertains to. So we might see it as work, or we may see that in like the public sphere. That's what one of the houses tells us, is like through the public eye. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if his chart actually landed in there.
Yeah.
And then I also did not analyze through any of this, any of the aspects, so the angles that I was talking about earlier that the planets make. So there's a lot to dive into there. I just didn't do it. I just did a brief overview of what energy we were getting from the planets.
Yeah. Well, still a very thorough and in-depth overview. You could spend hours talking about birth charts.
You really could. Now, when I was drawing this up, I started to think, and I don't know if you know this, Carissa, but did you know that you can draw up charts for anything, for stuff besides people?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so you can pull up a birth chart for, or just an astrology chart for events, countries, businesses, even questions. You can ask a question and then draw up a chart for the moment that you thought of the question to help you answer that question. That's a specific type of
course.
astrology called horary astrology. There's
Whoa.
astrology that helps you choose the best date for events. That's called electional astrology. So as I was thinking about this, I'm like, well, we're really interested in the 75 hard, not so much Andy, right?
And, yeah.
We should draw up the chart for 75 hard. But it was really hard to figure out what was the birth of the 75 hard.
Yeah.
I looked online, I asked ChatGPT, and I really couldn't get a good answer. Do you have any guesses, Carissa?
So taking away like the podcast, like when he first came up with it, that's like, I would say like 2005.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that's what's really interesting is the date that we pull it from would give us a slightly different interpretation of it.
Yeah.
So if we were to pull the chart for, the 2005 when he did it for himself, that's going to give us a description of that version of the 75 hard. Now, if we drop the chart for the moment the podcast dropped, we are going to get a different version, one that is in the public eye, one that is a little bit more refined than the first one, that has more of its own identity. So it's hard to see there. The dates that I found was, it said that it was created in March of 2019 is the quote that I found. So I just pulled up a chart for March 1st, 2019, and it really didn't resonate. I wasn't getting a cohesive like story of it. So I was just feeling that that probably wasn't an accurate date. So knowing that it originated much, much earlier, and maybe I don't know the first time that he released it to the public, because I wasn't sure if that
Mhm.
podcast where he talked about it was the first time he told the public about it.
Yeah. It's hard to say. Hmm. This is all, like, so wild that you can even do this. Astrology is so deep.
Yeah. Did you learn anything else about Andy's life when you were doing research that didn't come through our astrological interpretation?
Yeah. Well, when I was doing my note taking, I had a good inkling that you were gonna cover a lot of his astrology, um, which was accurate. And on the one website I found, because there was a random website that was called Andy Frisella's birth chart, and then Pam like kind of took part of that and then just made her own. But it was showing how like what his perfect match astrologically would be like with his compatibility. Which then I was like, I wonder if he actually has someone that he's like married to. So I typed in Andy Frisella married question mark. And he's been married since 2009 to this woman named Emily. And from what I've gathered, they could not be more of a perfect fit. I wouldn't be surprised if 75 Hard came around the time of when he got married or if that's something they do together. But she is a businesswoman, entrepreneur, author, who could have guessed? She like has like cookbooks, but more like well known. She has this company that's called Paper and Plan Company, which advertises itself as like a luxury paper brand. But they essentially have many notebooks, planners, calendars, sticky notes that are like more detailed so you can add like different things. Similar to if you remember like the knock knock pads that we have.
Yes.
So similar style to that is just like helping to plan your life, to organize your thoughts. And she has this whole company that she is like the CEO of. And then on her website, she's like recipes, workouts, and blogs with no mention of 75 Hard because I was curious. I was like, but I guess they don't mix the brands. Her brand is very like light, very airy, very like quirky fonts,
Interesting.
which is very different than like 75 Hard, black,
Yeah.
red. Yeah,
So
it
it's
was
kind
not
of
that
like
at
they're
all.
doing the same thing, but in different fonts.
Yeah.
That's so
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. So it was very well, you mentioned something actually earlier, which was funny. In her like about section, it says she has a no fluff, no BS approach to business. And I said, that line is definitely somewhere on Andy's website. So it seems like they both are very goal oriented, very driven, very, I think, like leaders in like their own companies, like being an entrepreneur and having that like mindset, I think is very unique. But I think it said that his like ideal partner was a Sagittarius and she's a Cancer. So, but again, that is just her sun sign. There was not much information, so I don't think we need to pull her birth chart. But it is very fun, I guess, just seeing that like he has a partner that definitely like matches and meets a lot of his brand and what we know of his life. And they seem to be like she's like a COO of a company that he's a CEO of, so they do like work together. So I think they have their personal life as well as businesses together. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if like deeper in the website she like mentions his like supplements and different things that you can add to enhance the workouts. But I do think it's sweet. I think they probably have a fun life, both very goal oriented people.
Do they have kids?
I was just thinking that. I don't know. I have no idea if they
I
have
don't
kids,
think I would
actually.
want them as my parents. That would just be
I
a
think
lot
they
of
have
pressure.
dogs.
That's fine. They can have dogs. That seems
Yeah, they can
ideal.
have dogs. Yeah, because she had some like dog recipes, like for like different dog treats on her website and like blog posts. But I did not see anything about kids actually when I was doing this research. But yeah, I do think they would be very much the like achievist style of parenting. All in all, I think it was a fun little deep dive that we did
Yeah, it's great.
in
And
just learning more.
yeah, and this is where I'm going to tie it back to our normal episodes because I do think that whether you believe in astrology or not, it's a good tool for personal reflection. So, generating this chart about yourself or about someone else and just reflecting on different personality traits, whether it's true or not, you can see it and say, that does resonate with me or that doesn't resonate with me. And it's just a way to explore different aspects of yourself, maybe things
Mhm.
that you wouldn't have thought about before. But I think I like that astrology has sometimes some contradictions in it because it applies to different areas of your life. So you can think of yourself as someone who's multifaceted, layered, and analyze it in that way. So, um, we are seeing Andy through different viewpoints. We see him more of as a leader than maybe I would have before analyzing his chart, seeing the way that maybe it's more about how he thinks that leads. This analytical mind is what leads everything that he does, and the discipline that we're seeing on the back end is just the way that it ties up neatly with the bow. So, um,
Mhm.
it's it's just very interesting to think about
Yeah.
people in different ways.
And I think going back, I think having with Andy having layers, I think when we look at 75 hard, it is labeled as like a mental toughness challenge just because it is not purely a fitness-based challenge. And I think sometimes people gloss over the like reading 10 pages a day. But like when he talks about like in his podcast, he has some of that humor that you mentioned where he's just like, read a book, learn something new, get off your phone, like learn something, read a book. Like that is just like a basic, like fundamental thing that you should be doing. And I think that ties into some of the other areas of his like go deeper. And I think I probably like, I was like, there's another task on the 75 hard checklist. But I think like when it goes to being more of like a whole person, it's not just you're not just working out, you're not just drinking water and dieting, you're reading a book. And I also think the progress photos can play into that of just being able to like track some of those things. So I do think he's deeper than meets the eye, but I'm glad that we got to dive a little deeper
Yeah.
into Andy Frisella.
Definitely. So, if you enjoyed hearing us talk a little bit about the 75 hard and want to hear more about how the challenge went, you'll have to stay tuned for our episode and premiere of season 2 on June 10th. Until then, we are still on hiatus. So, we will see you later and thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.